If you've ever found comparing power and conflict poems confusing, or you're not really sure on how to structure your answer, this video is going to make it really simple. I'm going to show you a method that you can use for any poem. So you don't have to memorize loads of different approaches and loads of different acronyms. So if your exam is coming up, stay with me. This is going to help you feel a lot more confident. Now, before we get into how to do it well, let's quickly look at why students lose marks. Because this is exactly what the most recent examiner reports have said, and also things that I see as a teacher and examiner myself. But this isn't just my opinion, this is what examiners are seeing year after year according to reports. Number one, a really common issue is students are not comparing. Students write about one poem, so let's say for half of their answer, and then the other half write about the second poem, and that keeps their answers fairly in the middle in terms of marks. Another one is weak opening, so starting with one poem instead of comparison straight away. 3, students also often just spot similarities but don't explore differences, and that's what pushes you into the higher bands, that being able to really compare two poems simultaneously. Number 4, unbalanced analysis. And now this is where one poem is analysed in a lot of detail and the other poem is barely explored. And finally, a big one, losing focus on the question and not having a clear structure. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fix all of that with a really simple method. And just quickly, if you want a model of exactly how to structure answers like this, I've linked a free literature model answer booklet below with annotated examples that you can download after the video. Okay, how to get top marks. So here's exactly what gets you into the top marks and the top bands. And this is straight from what examiners are looking for. So first, you need to compare from the very start. So instead of opening with one poem, open with something like both poems show. Now that immediately signals to the examiner that you are comparing and you are attempting to use that skill of comparison, which you are being marked on. Next, you are exploring both similarities and differences, not just saying that they are the same. And this is really important. You also need to balance your analysis, giving both poems equal attention. And this is really important. Stay tightly focused on the question. Everything that you say should link back to the idea that you're being asked about. And finally, use a clear structure. And the one that I teach and we're going to use in this video today is PEASL, which makes comparison really, really straightforward. Once you've got all of this in place, everything becomes much easier. And this is exactly the kind of thing that I go through step by step in a lot of detail in my live lessons, where we practice how to actually answer exam questions. Okay, now this is the part that makes everything much easier. As a teacher and examiner, this is the exact structure that I teach my students because I know that it works. So let's break it down. You always start with your point, and this is really important. You open with a comparison. So both poems show that conflict is. Now this immediately, as I said, tells the examiner that 1, you're answering the question, and 2, you are comparing from the start. Then you move into poem A, and this is where you use PEASL. If you're not familiar with the acronym PEASL, you might have used something like PEE or PEAL at school before. I'll show you this in practice in a minute. So ultimately you have your quotation, you zoom in on one word, you explain the effect and you link it back to the question. After that you compare, and this is where you bring in your connective, something like similarly, however, in contrast, on the other hand. This is the bridge between your two poems. Then you move into poem B and you do exactly the same thing, PEASL, but here's the key difference. You are still thinking about poem A while you do this in poem B. So you're not just analysing, you are comparing. Now, if you look at the bottom of the slide, this is the most important point to remember. One idea, two poems compared throughout. And then for your full essay, you are just repeating this structure with 3 main comparison points and using PEASL for each poem. So you're making sure they're balanced and that you are closely analysing whilst comparing. So if you can do this consistently, you are showing the examiner a clear structure, clear comparison, and focused analysis. And that's exactly what gets you into those top bands. All right, let's break this down then for you. So first of all, look at the opening line. Both Kamikaze and Remains explore the lasting psychological impact of conflict. Now this is doing 2 things really well. Number 1, it's a clear comparison straight away. Number 2, this is actually your first main idea out of 3. So if you're writing a full essay, this would be the point 1 out of your 3 comparison points. So one idea that you're going to explore, using both poems. Okay, then moving it into poem A, Remains. Now, what's good here is that they're not just retelling the poem, they're going straight into their evidence, their quotation, which is probably armed, possibly not. And then they zoom in on the word probably. Now, this is exactly what examiners are looking for. This particular student isn't analysing everything. They are being very selective and precise with their evidence. Then the explanation, which is in blue, develops that idea. You know, the uncertainty, the lack of control, the guilt, no closure. So already this is a really clear developed piece of analysis. But the important part is next, which is the comparison. And they use here similarly. Now that's the signpost to the examiner that they are now bringing in the second poem. And as I said, you could obviously use likewise on the other hand in contrast, however. These are all really useful comparative connectives. So after similarly, they are moving into poem B, Kamikaze. And again, this follows the same structure, PEASL. And I teach PEASL for pretty much all language analysis because you don't need very long, fancy acronyms. I believe that you should be keeping it simple. Now they then zoom in on the word bunting. Again, they're being really precise and selective with the language they are analysing. They're not just saying this is a simile. They are exploring what the word actually suggests, which is celebration, community, for example. Now here's what makes this a strong comparison answer. In this second section, so the second paragraph here, they are not just analysing Kamikaze on its own separately. They are actively comparing it back to Remains. So for example, they say, unlike the soldier in Remains in the blue section. Now this is important because what it shows the examiner is that they haven't lost focus. They are still comparing, they are still linking back to the original idea. Obviously, you can pause it and read these. And then at the end with the yellow, with the link, the yellow, they bring it back to the big idea, which is that both poets show that conflict has lasting psychological effects, but in different ways. So the final sentence is doing two things, reinforcing the comparison and linking back to the question. So if you take anything from this, it's this. One idea, two poems compared throughout. Now, one really important thing to remember is it doesn't actually matter too much how you paragraph your answer. For example, you could do it like this, where you have one paragraph on poem A and then another on poem B, which is what I've done here. But as you can see, both poems have been compared within. Or you could combine them into sort of one paragraph. The key thing is not the paragraphing, it's how well you're comparing. And as long as you are linking the poems clearly, using comparative language, keeping your focus on the same idea, you are doing exactly what the examiner is looking for. And if you can do that, you're moving into the top bands. If you want to see more examples like this, I've put together a free literature model answer booklet, which you can download below, which includes structures, model paragraphs, and detailed annotations that I've made as a teacher and examiner, explaining why those particular answers meet the top band. They are all broken down, and you can download that using the link below. Hope that was helpful. I will see you in the next video.